My name's Coby. I run a small business with a friend of mine, and my wife and I help lead a missional community in the town of Stillicum. About 6,000 people, pretty small town, kind of a suburb of the Tacoma area, but it was the first incorporated town in the state of Washington. It's primarily made up of retired people and military families, getting to be some more young families and stuff there, but so there aren't a ton of huge visible needs just jumping out at you in the area. So in our missional community context, we are still approaching it like every area does still have brokenness in this world, and Jesus is interested in redeeming all of it. So we just work out kind of through discussion and what we know in living there and the relationships we have, just where do we see brokenness in this area, and kind of figure out the context through that. So thinking about this whole idea of proactive and reactive mission, or corporate and private mission, or individual, I think one of the big things I've learned about it is that I think God is very interested in the reactive side of things. And in the way the reactive stuff works is it's as we are transformed, as our character changes and the things we care about and what our priorities and values are in that everyday life stuff, the reactive mission flows out of us. It just happens as we see needs, as we bump into people and things like that. The way you get there, though, is through, oftentimes the way God gets us there is through proactive mission, through saying, okay, what's a need? Where do we see brokenness? What are we going to do about it? Okay, what do you want to do? Who's going to do what? Let's go about this together as a team, as a missional community. And as you're doing that, all the junk starts to come out, and I don't really feel like making waffles for my neighbors today. Like, I just want to, have a lazy day. And like, well, do you believe you've just been blessed to serve yourself? Or like, we've been blessed by God, but He's placed us here to be a blessing. And those kinds of discipleship opportunities and stuff, they come out in the proactive mission. And I think that's where a lot of the front end work of growing and maturing as a disciple of Jesus and understanding this missionary identity, I think a lot of that gets worked out in the proactive mission. And some of it gets lived out there in a really messy way, and sometimes successfully, and sometimes it can be an utter failure. Your proactive mission can seem to be an utter failure. But what's getting worked out there is this identity stuff and the application of it that then gets lived out more in the reactive, the individual part of life. One interesting struggle I've experienced in kind of balancing or learning this proactive and reactive mission side of things is sometimes we can get so hyper-focused on the proactive side of things that we are unfaithful to what God has put in front of us on the reactive side of things. A struggle can be you can justify being sort of disengaged from your next door neighbor who's in need because they're not on your proactive mission statement. And that's just not God's heart. That's not the way God works. That's not the way Jesus works. That's not the way his kingdom comes. So a struggle is keeping in perspective that the proactive mission, it's what we're identifying as the proactive mission. God has a proactive mission too, and it's way bigger than anything we will ever dream up, no matter how big the whiteboard and how long the strategy meetings are. God's proactive mission is way bigger than what we are going to identify as our proactive mission. And so the challenge is you've got to have a proactive mission, because if you don't have anything that you're unifying around and working on, you're just going to be a bunch of disconnected individuals. But you've also got to not be so hyper-focused on that proactive mission that you justify unfaithfulness to who God has called us to be in the everyday life kind of things that God is going to bring up in your work, in your family, in your relationships with your neighbors, all those kinds of things. I've justified being a jerk to my wife for the sake of the proactive mission. I got to get this stuff ready. Don't bug me. I can't help with that right now. I can't change Theodore's diaper. I got to finish planning this thing out for this big thing. And it's a challenge, really just I think a character challenge. I think when a missional community has an understanding, when it's made clear this concept of proactive and reactive, it allows for there to be structure and spontaneity. It allows for there to be a plan and a sense of freedom and genuineness and authenticity. And so I think when you're identifying your proactive mission, you've got to let everybody weigh in on this. It's not just something a leader decides and then recruits everybody and says, okay, you're all committed to this now. Everybody's got to weigh in on that. But in that, there's going to be other people's hearts are going to be drawn to, I'm really feeling like more just excited about the opportunities here. And if you're only talking about proactive mission, I think some people can end up feeling a guilt that, oh man, I'm not showing up to the breakfast thing for, the food bank this Saturday. And really the reason they're not showing up for it is because they're going camping with their neighbor that they've been building a relationship with that just, or they need to work to help one of their coworkers out or something like that. And if we're only talking about the proactive, it can create an unnecessary sense of guilt. And so the fruit I've seen of this is when we emphasize both, that God cares about both, our proactive identified mission and the rest of our life and all the reactive things that come up, it allows people some freedom to be creative themselves and start to think not just the mission is something that these leaders hand down to us. The mission is something that I'm entrusted with and that I've got some freedom and responsibility and flexibility to create. And so the individual is allowed to maintain their individuality while still being part of a group. They don't cancel each other out. If I could give one piece of advice about the proactive and reactive mission, explain to people that God is intensely interested in both. The proactive mission is us identifying a little piece of God's proactive mission and saying, we're going to do something about that. And the reactive is all these other parts that we're not even thinking of about God's proactive mission in the world. And when we talk about both, and we talk about that God cares about both, it allows people to, I think it creates an environment where people can more creatively engage their individual place in the kingdom of God, that they have a role to play and it matters, and they're not just a cog in a machine. They're a human being given the Spirit of God for specific purpose. He's prepared good works for them to walk out. And the proactive context, it allows us to work out our identity in a really intentional, planned out way. It's really valuable and important. It's Jesus saying, come follow me. Let's go do this. But the purpose wasn't just, we just got to get this done. The purpose was their lives were transformed as they followed him and joined on this proactive mission of announcing the kingdom of God in Galilee and Judea. And that's the same thing that's happening in this proactive and reactive thing. As people get engaged in a proactive mission and say, okay, I see what God's doing here, God's heart, we're going to do something about this problem, it starts to transform us. It starts to change our character. The Spirit matures us, and it changes the way we live and the reactive and the way we identify. Man, I never even noticed that my neighbor's yard never has been mowed this summer. And now I'm noticing things like that. And I went over and knocked on her door, and then we had tea together, and I found out all this stuff. Just that kind of stuff happens more in a proactive setting. But talk about this stuff. It really helps people work it out for themselves and for the community to feel like we can be together on something, and it's not all about everything that's organized. Like, what you're doing in your everyday life really matters too. So talk about it.